Right, so I'm glad I have a whiteboard here because I'm not going to be using it at all. In fact, it's just a nice little prop to make me look productive and cool. So I guess I've told this story to a lot of my friends, a lot of my business partners or associates and all that type of stuff now. But I've never really talked about it online. And what I wanted to break down is exactly how I went from being extremely unhappy in Sydney, Australia, not for the city or the place, but necessarily, but in a job that I didn't like, in a career that I didn't like, where I wasn't really making money, I wasn't really satisfied with my life, and then transitioning that to being able to live full time in Milan, overseas, 24 hours away, in a country that I didn't know the language, I didn't know any people before I moved here, I didn't know really how to live alone or do any of this stuff, and kind of just figured along the way to the point where now I'm able to run a multi seven figure business where I have my own employees that do this with me, and I'm able to develop softwares, travel, have freedom, and just be able to live a life that I never thought would be truly something that I'd have the courage to do. So I'll start from the beginning. Essentially, about 2.5 years ago, probably a little bit less now, maybe 2.5 years ago, I moved to Milan from Sydney, Australia. And I knew entrepreneurship was always something that I'd eventually do, but at the time, I'd started businesses from like 15, maybe 16, with some success, but I never really knew what I was doing. And my gripe with Sydney was that it seemed there's like a big gap, right? There's people at the bottom and there's people at the top. And this isn't necessarily with the whole of society, but in terms of entrepreneurship, right? There's a big gap between the bottom and the top. And so if you're trying to learn from people, it's almost what's the word? Improper or rude to ask people about their business, their income, how they make money, how they do this stuff, or navigate these challenges. And so for me, it seemed like it was super cloudy. I couldn't even get an understanding out of pure curiosity of how these people become successful, because I was like, well, I want to become successful, but I can't seem, even though I knew people or rich or wealthy people, I don't really know how I could actually replicate that for myself. So anyway, I started all many businesses throughout that, and even throughout university when I was doing that, and I was working full time at actually a juice bar or a coffee shop, whatever you want to call it, and studying full time. So I was working like 110 hours a week. And at that time, I literally developed chronic exhaustion. I was in the hospital like multiple times. I would be just like absolutely wiped for a week at a time. And I got this thing like I'd have this like 12 times a year at least, so once a month essentially, just be totally wiped out for a whole week, exhausted, shakes, vomit, I couldn't eat, I'd drop like 5 or 10 kilos. And I was like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like I can't figure out like what is going on. And what I realized was I was taking on there's a couple of factors, but one, I was taking on so much internal stress from other people being like, oh, you can't do this, or it's really, you shouldn't be working that much, or you shouldn't be doing this. But I had that like stubbornness where I was like, no, I have to do something. I don't know how to do this, but I really want to be successful. And I guess the best thing is just brute force right now. And so I did that for a while and it didn't work, obviously, because you're just running yourself into the ground. It's not scalable. It's not, you're building no leverage and you're not working at the right things. And that's really important. Like with business or anything, you have to work at the right things. And so I did that. I graduated in architecture. All of a sudden it's 2019, 2020, maybe. I think I graduated 2019, immediately got a job, like literally the day I graduated. And then January 2020 was when COVID started to hit. And Australia was like super strict. And so what happened was I got this job. Fortunately, my employer was pretty lenient. He was like, yeah, well, whatever, COVID. And so I was working the entirety of that 2 year period of COVID because I wasn't allowed to leave the country for a particular reason that I won't talk about on this particular video. But I wasn't allowed to travel. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. And fortunately, my boss was cool with that. And I was just working in there. So the whole time with COVID, everyone's chilling at home, doing nothing, messing about on their laptops, doing jack shit. I was working. And what I figured out during that time was just like, I can't do this. I literally can't do this. I am going to, you can bleep this, but I'm literally going to kill myself if this is the reality of my life for the next 40 years. I just can't sit in an office, look at a screen and pretend to be happy or like, hi Janice, how are you? Have a great morning. Like, I don't care. I don't care. So I was sitting there thinking this whole time, like, what the hell? What the hell am I going to do? Obviously, something has to change, but like, one, do I have the courage to change it? And two, what the hell am I going to do? And so fortunately, my office had like a nice big window. So I used to look out there and be like, what the hell am I going to do? And so I found this I guess you could say course video, whatever, and it kind of woke me to is like basically what they're talking about is if you don't know what to do, pick sales, and you'll pick up an amazing skill, you'll make money, and then you can use that money to go into other things. And I was like, look, it's a 50-50 bet. I can do that, or I can continue in what I'm doing and never have the courage to actually step out of what people expect of me. and be extremely unhappy for the rest of my life. So what I'll do is I'll leave it up to the universe. And so what I did is I got Indeed, which is a job application or recruiting platform, and I opened it up. And basically, what they told me was, what I told myself was, I'm going to either apply for another architecture job or a sales job, and whichever I get back first, I'll go with as my life path. And so I opened up my laptop, I was going through, applied for a bunch of jobs pretty equally, maybe like 5 and 5 or something like that. It wasn't even that many applications. And I got a call back from this sales space who was like kind of new, developing. They're looking for people that weren't necessarily with sales background, but had the potential to be trained up. And I was like, perfect. So I applied, hopped on the interview, did well, saw myself, told the whole entrepreneurial vision, whatever. And he was like, cool, I see potential in you, let's go. And I was fortunate enough to work under this extremely talented, like marketing and sales professional, kind of was the country manager. And I went from there to being, knowing nothing about sales, even though I told him I did, to being the top rep in that, like countrywide. And it taught me a lot of different lessons that I'll pick up. It's not really that necessary to go into this particular story, but what I realized was, this is cool. It's still not really what I want because I'm going to an office. I still have to dress in like some stupid attire. I still have to, suck up to the boss to some extent or follow their rules and just live a life that I just couldn't really be aligned with. I just felt like I was just lying to myself. And so that went on for about 8 months or so. And I used that to save up like this pot of money to go across the world. Because I was always thinking like, I really want to move overseas. If I was going to pick anywhere, it would probably be like somewhere cool like Milan because I had a friend there. I was like, well, she was there. It looked really fun when she was living there. And she was from Australia too. So I was like, okay, well, there's probably some potential there. And I'd been to Italy before, but not Milan. So I was like, well, must be good enough. And so for about 8 months, I saved up enough cash to kind of make the risk or take the risk and move overseas. So I bought a one-way ticket, shitting myself at the time, but a one-way ticket and hopped on the flight, I don't know, September or something like that, and moved to Milan. And the first thing I get is like the first day I hop into Milan, I get out of the train, I get out of the airport and get to the city. And it's like peak tourism season because it's just after summer. It's cooled down a little bit, but it's still nice weather. So it's just packed full of people speaking a different language. I don't know anyone. I don't know anything. Fortunately, I met someone briefly before who helped me out kind of a little bit in Italian. So she was a great help. But again, I was just so overwhelmed at the thought of what have I done? Like, I have no job prospects. I don't speak the language. I don't know anything about living in Italy or how to secure a rental contract. I literally have an Airbnb for a month and I guess I'll figure it out. And so I was working in there and, well, I wasn't working. I was in my Airbnb trying to find work. And what I stumbled upon was this particular group. And this particular group ended up being, I paid like $3,000 for access to this group, which was basically just more or less a scam. And fortunately, through that group, though, I found a person who kind of introduced me to the online sales business type space. So I was like, okay, cool. Like this can be something that I resonate with. Because I was literally that night, the night before, I went for a walk in Porto Venezia in Milan. And I just looked up at the sky. I was like, God, what the fuck am I going to do? Like, please, like, I have this vision, but I don't know how I'm going to do this. I took the risk, I trusted in you. I bought a one-way ticket. I'm by myself on the opposite side of the world, like 24 hours with no job, no prospects, no idea how I'm even going to sustain my life. And I was like, please just give me like something. And the day after that, fortunately, I was kind of introduced to this. So ran that up and this person kind of introduced me to a few people and I met some great partners. And fortunately, through a connection of them, I met a Harvard entrepreneurial coach on this call one night. And his name was Chris. I'm still business partners with him to this day. Fantastic mentor. And I ran into him and essentially he taught me so much in terms of entrepreneurship, business. And I was able to, when we talk about delayed gratification, I actually worked with Chris, with another partner of mine, Josh. And we worked under him basically for $0 for 6 months. So I didn't make a cent for the first 6 months. And I was stressing, watching my bank account go like this the whole time. And I was like, it's going to pay off. It's going to pay off. He's a Harvard sales and entrepreneurial coach. There's going to be so much skills that I pick up and connections that I can get from this person, which was eventually true. But the amount of conviction that you have to have in yourself to actually sustain that was pretty scary at the time. So for 6 months, we were working in building this business, kind of doing the grunt work and figuring out how everything works. And fortunately through that, it kind of allowed me to understand a bit more about the business world, how it works, online sales, consulting, all this type of stuff. So that was amazing. And literally it was, I think, month 5 or 6, somewhere around there. But as my bank account's tanking, there's a certain point you get to, and essentially it was the amount that a flight return back to Australia would cost. And I think at the time it was maybe $2,000 and maybe it was peak season or whatever. I think maybe summer or winter or whatever it was. And you see the bank account has $2,500 in it, and you look at Skyscanner and it says return flight to Australia, $2,500 or $2,300, and you're thinking, rent's due in probably a week and a half. I'm not making any money. I haven't made any money. What am I going to do? Am I going to be homeless in a foreign country just out of pride and not tell my family because I had way too much pride to actually tell anyone? Am I going to buy a return flight and return to Sydney as a failure? And I kind of left it up to, again, the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. And it was like 3-4 days. And we actually went to Spain at the time. And basically, I was with other people. I saw this person, Warren, who I now, again, one of my business partners now, he made $15,000 in a month. And it just woke me up. And I was just like, well, that's possible? You can make that much money online. I was like, what the hell? And during that time, I was like, okay, well, something has to change. And so I reached out to this person, again, another one of my business partners now at the time. And I'll shout him out, Cole. And we pitched ourselves on doing, sales management, operations management for his company at the time. And fortunately, he was looking for young, hungry people, and he gave us a shot. And so from there, it was about you can see your $2,500 just dwindling further and further and further. And it was like a race to, one, be able to pay rent, which was about €1,000 at the time, and I had 2,500 AUD, so I had about maybe 5 weeks left of rent money left. And that was me getting the cheapest stuff from the grocery store to just buy whatever. Anyway, at a certain point before, it got to a point where I had probably about $150 to $200 in my bank account left. And I was like, dude, I don't know what I'm going to do. I cannot go back to a failure. But I know I can't sit in an office because I go back to Australia. Like, what am I going to do? And thank God that first month that we had an extremely successful month. I had a fantastic payday. Literally the month after, made great money, cracked 10K that I was dreaming of for the previous 6 months in 1 month. Well over 10K. And it just kind of changed the whole course of, I guess, my life, I guess you could say. So fortunately from there, I ended up finding kind of a direction, focusing on operations, sales, building out my own companies, and kind of with the direction and mentorship of Chris, Cole, and a few other mentors, Chase, plenty of amazing people that I met over the time. I kind of from there went up also. But it really goes to show, like, I think I've talked about it in the past, but having like that delusional level of self-belief, almost to an extent of like, am I an idiot? Like, something has to be, like, everything is going wrong. But I also have to believe in myself to an extent where it's like, I still trust in my vision that I can do this. I don't know how. In fact, the odds aren't in my favor at all. But I'm going to make something work. And fortunately, I decided to just go all in and risk being a homeless person in Milan on the other side of the world, because I wouldn't have asked anyone for help or handouts at the time, even now. I'm going to risk being homeless. I'm going to risk going broke. I'm going to risk it all. I already put in this much risk and attention toward this goal. Like, what's the worst that can happen? I'm homeless for a bit. I'm sure I can figure it out. Something can happen. And so, yeah, when you get down to that point where it's like, you have almost nothing in your bank account, you have no way home, something has to work. And you'll notice this as a trend in your life as you go through things. But once you really take that step, and for me, I mean, you could say religious or spiritual to an extent, where I have a relationship with God, but really you almost got to leave it up to God to an extent. It's like, you took the step, now it's up to God to meet you, right? So for me in those situations, it was just like, look, I took this huge risk. I am all in. If this fails, I am finished. Please help. Please do whatever you can to make this a success, and trust in the vision that I had. So fortunately, that ended up working, and since then we've built this with my many partners and fantastic people. And the most important thing is that I actually love working with these people. From there to many different businesses I've scaled. At the time I was working at 7 different businesses, a COO or operations management or some type of operations consulting help. From there, leverage that for some of the biggest connections you could have. I've worked with people who have done 600 million. I've booked over hundreds of billion-dollar brands for the agency at the time. Moved into multiple different agency pursuits, call centers, operated call centers in 5 different countries simultaneously. Got into software, scaled our first business, my own business, to past 7 figures within the first 12 months. And then again, another time from zero to $1 million ARR within 60 days since. So really a lot of that's as a result of the learnings that I had here, and just kind of having that ridiculous conviction in yourself that it's like, well, I already took the risk, so what's the worst that can happen? So if you take anything from this video or story, just take that one thing where it's like, if you have something you've been thinking about for a long time, or a vision that you have for your life and you haven't quite had the courage to go for it yet, sometimes it's just a matter of taking that step in the darkness and just praying that it works out. And a lot of the time you'll find, once you're actually willing to put yourself out to that risk, good things happen.